When I first start to think about how everything went very wrong, I find it almost funny in a really dark and absolutely insane way, because I actually thought I was being careful and smart about everything I was doing. I was 36 years old at the time when this all happened to me, living and working in the UK where I was from, and I'd been doing the same job for, I'd guess, 15 years at that point in time. Me and a few of the lads from work had been talking about taking a trip somewhere a bit different. We'd been away together before, quite a few times since our early 20s, but usually we went to the typical sorts of places that people from the UK go to, such as Spain or Greece. We hadn't been away for quite a long time, and I don't know how the topic of the Philippines even came up, but one day we were thinking about where to go, and the next it was like, we're going to the Philippines. When are we going? On top of that, I'd always wanted to go to a country in Asia, and the Philippines seemed like it could be as good place to go as any. There were four of us going, all around the same age, all working in the same place. And we'd been mates since our school days, so we figured it would be a right laugh. We booked 2 weeks in the Philippines, flying first to Manila, and then we planned to travel around a bit to see a few different islands and some of the beaches that were meant to be incredible there. Since I'd never been to Asia before, I was actually very excited about it. Excited about seeing somewhere completely different from what I was normally used to seeing. When we arrived in Manila, it was absolutely boiling hot. Way hotter than I'd expected it to be, even though I knew it was going to be warm, humid as well, which actually made the heat even worse. I'm thinking it was about 10 degrees hotter than I'm used to when I typically go away on holiday. We spent a couple of days in Makati, just letting the jet lag fade, mainly spending time around Makati and BGC. Makati was wild. We heard about Thailand before. A couple of guys from work had been and said it was crazy, and I'd say what we saw in Makati was similar to that. Manila wasn't meant to be the main part of our holiday though, so after we'd been there for a few days, we took a flight down to Caticlan because we were going to an island called Boracay. Apparently, the beaches there were incredible, and it was one of the best islands to go to if you wanted to experience the Philippines for the first time. We stayed at this amazing resort that was right there on one of those pristine beaches. It wasn't too expensive, but it was decent enough, and we spent our days lounging around, just relaxing by the pool or on the sand and drinking quite a lot of beer. It was exactly the kind of holiday I'd been needing and expecting, just switching off from work and enjoying myself with the lads. And for the first few days on Boracay, that's exactly what it was. It was everything that I hoped it would be. I guess we'd been there for probably 3 or 4 days, and every day we were going to different bars and restaurants in the evening. And these were not the sort of bars that you got in places like Makati. These were just normal bars, and that's when I actually ran into a girl that made me take a step back. This particular evening, the four of us had gone out for some food, and we walked a different way out of our resort than we used to do. While on the other days, we'd gone one day, where all the action seemed to be, we actually took a different turn, where things seemed to be quieter. But we were told that things got busier the further you went. After we'd had something to eat, we spontaneously ended up at this loud bar that had music playing like most of the bars did, and it was very busy with mainly tourists, but there also seemed to be some local people there as well. However, it seemed that they were local Filipinas, but they weren't from the island. They were from different parts of the country there on holiday as well. She was working there as a waitress. She came over to take our order. When you're there with your mates and an attractive girl approaches, you all know what the score is. But I noticed straight away that she was really beautiful. She looked like she was probably in her early 20s, and she had this smile that just made you feel good when you looked at her. I suppose you know what you mean if you've been in a similar position. My mates seemed to be acting in more of a crude manner, but I knew what the score was, so I ordered a beer for us all, and she brought them over, and I tried to make some conversation with her, asking how long she'd worked there and things like that. It was just the usual casual chit-chat that takes place in situations like that situation that I was in. She was very friendly and also very chatty, and she spoke really good English, which made it easy to talk to her. That was one of the good things about the Philippines. Everyone spoke English so well. My mates were all talking amongst themselves, and I found myself spending quite a bit of time talking to her whenever she came over to our table. I was enjoying it. She told me her name and that she was from a village about half an hour away from the place we got the boat to the island from, and she said that she worked at the bar to make money because there wasn't much work in her village. She also had to support her family. I felt a bit sorry for her because she seemed like a nice girl who was just trying to get by, and I found myself wanting to help her out somehow. At the end of the night, when we were leaving, she gave me her phone number and said I should message her if I wanted to meet up sometime. And I was buzzing because I hadn't expected it at all and we'd gotten along so well. So this was amazing to me. My mates saw the whole thing and they were giving me grief about it, taking the mick out of me and saying I'd finally managed to score, but it was all good-natured banter really, as mates do. I couldn't stop thinking about her when we left that bar, and we actually went to another bar afterwards, which was a blast, and the following morning I messaged her and asked if she wanted to meet up for a coffee or something, and she said yes. So we arranged to meet in the afternoon when she wasn't working. We met at this small cafe that she recommended near the beach my resort was at, and I guess we sat there for probably a good 2 hours just talking about everything. About what her life in the Philippines was like, and about my life in the UK. She asked me loads of questions about the UK and other things such as what I did for work, and she listened intently as if what I was saying was actually interesting. Perhaps to her it was, but to me it was just a normal, boring stuff. I told her about my job, and about how I lived alone in a small flat in a place called Coventry, and she told me all about her family as well. She was trying to save up some money to help them out with a few problems that they were facing. I found myself feeling really attracted to her, not just because she was beautiful, but because she seemed to be really kind and down to earth, and I liked spending time with her. We even met up again the next day and then the day after that, and before I knew it, I was seeing her every single day for the rest of the holiday, for a couple of hours at a time, and she became the thing that made my holiday so special. My mates were continuing to give me a bit of stick about it. I mean, most of them did, but another of my mates was a bit quiet about it and said he'd met someone as well, but he didn't want to give any information away. They were all saying that I was ditching them for a girl, but I think they were okay about it really, and they'd go off and do their own things while I was going to see her. I took her out for meals, of course I paid for everything, because I wanted to, let her experience that sort of thing, because I knew she didn't have that much money. I didn't have much money either, but it was different. After everything we spoke about, it was quite apparent that she had so much less than what I had. I mean, such a considerable amount less that it made me thankful to be where I was from. She never asked me for money directly, but it felt sometimes like she was implying that she wanted it. Like she'd mentioned things about how she needed to send money to her family or she had bills to pay, and I'd offered to help her out. I mean, that's how it started. I was starting to get more serious with her the closer to the end of the holiday it came. I probably gave her about 500 quid over the course of the first week, just little bits here and there when she mentioned needing something important. And it actually felt good to be able to help her out, and it also made me feel like we had something good going on together, and she always seemed really grateful. It made me start to feel like I might actually love this girl, which was most definitely not what I had in mind when I set off to the Philippines not that long ago. I did almost completely fall for her by the time the holiday was coming to end, and I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous because I barely knew her, apart from what we'd spoken about at length when we were together, but that's how honestly I felt, and it's one of those things that you can't change how you feel, you can't do anything about it. And I really didn't know what I was going to do now because I was due to leave in a few days' time. She made me feel like I was in my 20s again and like I was excited about life, and I hadn't felt that way in a long time. I'm not saying that I was upset or having a bad life at all, but this was a new kind of excitement that I'd not yet experienced, and because of that, I felt really good. I'd been on my own for quite a while. I'd been in a serious relationship in my late 20s, and that lasted for about 5 years, but it ended in a very bad way, and from then, while I had a few short relationships, nothing ever seemed to stick. I'd basically accepted that I wasn't able to control how things went in that department, and if the opportunity ever came up, I'd go for it, and this felt like it was that opportunity that I'd been looking for and waiting for such a long time. I was there with this beautiful young woman who was so easy to talk to and who made me laugh. I mean, no one made me laugh apart from my mates, and I was thinking that this could be something that I could want. Like, what more could I want? This woman who I spent hours texting with and chatting to, I just couldn't get enough of the whole thing. We started acting like, a real couple. It felt like a real relationship, even though we'd only known each other for a very short amount of time. And like I said, things did get serious between us. And when she told me that she really liked me and that she'd never met anyone like me before, I actually felt quite good. My mates knew what was going on, obviously, because I was spending so much of my time with her, and they'd made jokes about it, but nothing too harsh that actually offended me in any way. But there was that one mate who was quiet about it. He just said that he'd met someone as well and he didn't want to talk about it. I guess he didn't want the rest of us to mock him like they were mocking me. That one mate, though, he was quiet about it. He did seem particularly interested in hearing about her, and he would ask me questions about what she was like and where she'd go and things she'd do. And I don't know. It was weird, but it was just like normal questions, I thought. I didn't think anything much of it at the time. I just thought he was curious. I did find it a bit strange, like I said, because personal questions he would ask about her as well, like if she had siblings or if she had money. I guess he hadn't come to the understanding of how relationships like that in the Philippines actually worked. Suppose I hadn't, but if I think about it now, it was obvious. If she had a lot of money, like he was asking, she wouldn't be working in a place like that, and she wouldn't be talking to a guy like me. There's no point trying to sugarcoat it here. Let's be real. He never seemed interested in anything like this before, though. But I didn't take it as bad intent or anything like that, and gave him all the answers he'd hoped for, as any mate would do. When the 2 weeks were up and it was finally time to go home, I can safely say that I was devastated about having to leave her, and even that, I won't deny, is a huge understatement. We'd spent almost every single day together, at least a few hours a day for the last few days of my holiday, and before that, we spent time together as well. The thought of having to go back to the UK and not being able to see her anymore was really upsetting, and I absolutely dreaded having to say goodbye to her, because I didn't really know if I would ever see her again. I hoped that would come, and I was thinking about what I could do to make this happen, but even still, it was painful. She cried a lot when we had to say goodbye, and she told me she was going to miss me so much and that she wished I didn't have to leave. I felt like I didn't want to leave more than she didn't want me to leave, and I told her that I would definitely stay in touch with her every day and that I would do my best to work something out. Maybe I could come back and visit her as soon as possible, and I was even starting to think about the possibility of her going to the UK, which she said she would really like if it was possible. I just didn't have enough money to spend a few months with her. I needed to go back to work, and that made things even worse. On the flight back home, I couldn't stop thinking about her and about how I could make this work despite the distance and how difficult this made things. My mates were all talking about what a good holiday it had been and had already started making plans for the next one, but I was just sitting there feeling miserable about leaving her behind. When I got back to my boring old place in the UK, it felt even more depressing than it normally did, because I'd just spent all that time in that amazing place with that amazing woman, and now I was back to my work and my life, and I didn't want to be doing that. It didn't fill me with any sort of inspiration, it was depressing. One thing that it did do, though, what did make me realise just how dim life was before I met her, and this made me feel even worse. I messaged her as soon as I got home to let her know I'd arrived safely, and we started messaging each other every single day, multiple times a day, and I thought it was a long-distance relationship. We'd tell each other about how our days had been, and she'd send me photos of herself and I'd send photos back, and it was just like couples did. It felt like we were still together even though we were so far apart. She'd tell me all the time that she missed me and that she wished she could see me again physically, in person, and I'd tell her the exact same thing. It became the thing I looked forward to the most each day, getting a message from her and talking to her, but it wasn't perfect. I wanted to see her face to face, to hold her hand and walk with her on the street. I wanted this relationship to be real, maybe getting married at some point. I was thinking that far ahead and I liked her that much, but it was just so difficult that we were so far apart. After I'd been back in the UK for around about a week, I'd say, she messaged me saying that she was having trouble paying her rent and she asked if I could help her out. I didn't even hesitate. I didn't really know that sending money to a girl in a different country was not the best idea, if I'm being truthful about it. And anyway, I was starting to think that she was the love of my life and the thought of her struggling made me feel awful. I think I only sent her 200 quid that time straight away through Western Union. I felt the fees were way too high for the amount I sent, but she needed the money quickly, and bank transfers would have taken a few days. She was very grateful, and she kept thanking me again, and I could see that smile in my head that I remembered from when we met. This was a number of years ago now, before video calling was readily available. I could video call quite easily, but where she was, at least, the internet wasn't good enough, which was quite upsetting. After that, it became a regular thing, and I wasn't even picking up on it. I wasn't even understanding that I was sending her so much money. But it got to the stage where she'd message me saying she needed money for this or for that, and I'd send it to her, and I should have stopped to add it up, but I didn't. Sometimes it was for rent, which I was actually paying for her every month. Sometimes food, sometimes for her family. It was always something that they needed help with. And I would always send whatever she asked for because I wanted to help her out, because I cared about her. I knew about her struggles because I'd seen them firsthand, and I never questioned just how much she was asking for. Over the next few months, I probably sent her about £6,000 in total, which was an awful lot of money for me. But I didn't mind because I thought we were in a proper relationship, and that's what you do when you care about someone so deeply, like I cared about her. If I stopped to think about what I was doing, that was £6,000 across probably less than 3 months, and that was coming out of my savings. I didn't make that much money from working, so I should have known that that amount of money that I was sending was way more than she would need if she actually was being honest. But I didn't pick up on it because I was in love. I'd work my shifts and then come home and message her, and those conversations were the best part of my day, as miserable as it sounds, but they were. We'd talk about seeing each other again, and I started seriously thinking about either going back to the Philippines for another holiday or bringing her to the UK for a visit so we could spend more time together. The long distance was manageable but so difficult, but it's not the same as having someone there with you in person. My mates at work knew I was still talking to her, and they'd ask me how she was doing, and I'd tell them that things were going well between us and we were just thinking about what the best thing to do was. That one mate, the one I mentioned before, he'd always ask me the most questions about wanting to know details about how she was and whether I'd sent her any money and things like that. I thought he was just taking an interest because we were good friends, and I'd answer his questions without really thinking much about it. Once again, it never seemed ill-natured or malicious, and he was my mate. I didn't expect anything else. I spent a considerable amount of time looking into the requirements of getting her a visa to visit the UK, but it quickly became clear that this was going to be very difficult based on the fact that we'd only met very briefly, and there was going to be no way to prove that she would return to the Philippines when her visa expired. I did more research, and it was clear that we had 2 options, either fiancé visa or the spouse visa, and I wasn't ready to get married yet, but I thought we could apply for the fiancé visa, which would give her a chance to come to be with me in the UK for about 6 months, and we could take things from there. When I spoke to her about this, she sounded like this was something that she wanted to do so much, And after I called an immigration solicitor down in London, I was advised that, because we'd only met briefly, it would probably be best if I went back to the Philippines and spent a few weeks or a month or so with her. Then we could use all that as evidence that this relationship was real, as well as all the messages and phone call logs that had happened over the past months. That should have been enough proof to get the visa, and that's what I decided to do. I told my mates about this, and they all seemed to be quite jealous that I was planning on going back to the Philippines. At this point, we were already in a new year, so I had holiday, and instead of going away with my mates as normal, I would go to the Philippines and take all my holiday at once, so we could spend enough time together to get the application lodged, and then I could go back to the UK to wait for the outcome. Again, that one mate was asking more questions, but I wasn't pushing anything. It was just what he seemed to do when it got to the point where I just said to him, "Mind your own business, mate." I said that to him with a smile on my face, but he seemed to be deeply serious. I had no reason to believe that there was anything going on. Why would I think something was going on? I told her that it was my plan to go to the Philippines, spend a few weeks there, maybe a month if I could get away with it, and that should be enough, and she sounded happy, but not as happy as I thought about getting the visit visa, which is what we planned to do originally. I just told her that that wasn't going to be possible, and because of that, we needed to go down the fiancé visa road. I think she accepted that was the only thing we could do, and because of that, she was okay with it. And I didn't stop to think why she didn't seem to be as happy as I thought she would be, but I was happy, and I was moving ahead because I had no reason to believe anything other than me going to meet her, trying to get the relationship moving to the next level, and hopefully being able to get her the visa to go and see me in the UK, and maybe live with me permanently. With all that settled, I booked myself a return ticket as soon as I could get the time signed off at work. I managed to get 3 whole weeks all at once, which I thought would be just enough time to get all the things we needed in place. Then we could go from there. Basically, photos, things of that nature, tickets, receipts, everything to show that we were together and real and spending time together. When I landed back in Manila, I headed straight down to Boracay, and it was such an amazing feeling to be back because I dreamt about it for as long as I could remember. When I saw her, she didn't appear to be the same as she was when I left. I mean, she hugged me, but it was sort of like the same kind of hug that you give to a friend that you've known for a shorter while of time, not like it was from a girl who seemed so upset when she said goodbye. The way she smiled, it was like it was forced, and she spoke very directly to me, as opposed to being like you'd expect her to have been. The plan was to spend 3 days in Boracay and then go up to Manila, because that's where the embassy was, and I never really wanted to think of anything other than the fact that this is what I wanted to do, and what I was doing was the right thing. So I pushed ahead with the plan, and 3 days later, we went up to Manila, after taking lots of memorable photos where she still appeared forced. And she left occasionally because she said she had important calls to make with regards to her family. I was keeping track of everything I spent, as well as keeping all the receipts, and every time we went anywhere I would snap pictures to make sure that I had proof. To me, it was making sure that we got the visa without concern, because I was told that if there was any reason why they would decline a visa application, it would be because of lack of proof. Anything at all to cause them to decline it, they would, so I had to make sure that it was bulletproof. It was very enjoyable to be there, and it's not like she's acting so strained. It's just the little things that she seems to be doing all the time that I can't quite put my finger on. But I just decided that I would think about it in the only way that I could think about it, which was that she was very shy, reserved, and nervous about the possibility of leaving the Philippines for the first time in her life. She'd never left before, and when I actually thought about it long and hard, I bet it felt strange for her to actually be considering the prospect of going somewhere so different, and to start living a life so different to what she had been used to basically for forever. When it was time for me to fly back to the UK, we got absolutely everything that we needed in place, but the idea was that I would send it down to the solicitor I wanted to use so that they could help make sure that everything was in order. At this point, I'd probably send her, before I went to see her, a considerable amount of money, probably approaching £8,000, and I spent another £6,000 at this point on that trip to the Philippines. And by the time we put in the application, as well as paid for the solicitor, that would be a lot, and more money that I would send to her, that would pretty much be all of my money used up. I wasn't a rich man and I didn't have much savings. I was still in my 30s, and while my job gave me an okay income for the visa application, it wasn't like I was made of money. When I arrived back, I sent everything down to the solicitor. They sorted the application and helped me with the submission, which I did, and she also had a copy of everything in the Philippines in case she needed it. She needed to do some kind of seminar to be able to leave the country, which I thought odd, so that was something she did. That cost me money, and I also sent her a few more £1,000, which was getting close to my remaining funds, in order to help her with some family issues that had just cropped up. But I'm thinking as soon as she starts to be with me, things will steady out. She needed to do her passport, of course, which was the first thing that we actually did when I was there. That was submitted and taken care of, and she'd already got it. And with that in mind, the application was submitted, and then it was just a waiting game. I had no idea how long it was going to take for the application to be looked at, but it was actually quite quick. If I remember correctly, I think it took 3 weeks when she could go and collect her passport from the office. I was a bundle of nerves when I found this out because it said that the application was ready to collect, but it didn't say what the results were. So waiting for her to go from Boracay back up to Manila and then waiting a whole night for her to be able to go and get it, it was very stressful. But it needn't have been. When she got her passport, the visa was in it, and she was finally cleared to be able to leave the Philippines and see me in the UK, and I couldn't have been happier with the decision. I invested all my money into that relationship, and it was now time for me to be able to see if it was going to be something that could see its course. I had just about enough money left to pay for her plane tickets, which I did, and a few weeks later, I was busy watching a flight app for the progress of her flight, as she flew first from Manila to Qatar, and then the flight from Qatar to London, where I was going to be meeting her. I must have arrived at the airport about 4 hours before her plane was due to land, and then there was a further 2 hours to wait after it did land for her to make it through immigration, because apparently she was questioned, but she was allowed through. When I saw her, I felt incredible that all this effort and hard work had finally been for something, because she was there. But she looked like she'd seen a ghost when she saw me. I was struggling to understand what had happened. Perhaps she was just tired after 2 long flights, and I just ignored how she was acting and gave her a big hug and she reciprocated. But again, it was as if it was forced. I was still thinking that before long she would come round and our life together would begin and things would go well. We got back to my place, after which she was tired and went to bed, and it was rather late, so I followed not long after. Over the course of the next few days, things just seemed to be moving ahead smoothly, but she was always texting and messaging people, and I didn't really know what it was about. She just kept saying it was to do with her family in the Philippines and everything's good. I had plans not long after this to go and help her register at the GP, as well as other little things that she would need to do, and then I wanted to live together as a happy couple. I was going to work every day. One thing that I did notice, though, was that my mate, who asked lots of questions before, was acting even stranger than he was before. I mean, I'd never seen him act like that, and it wouldn't be long before I would find out what had actually transpired and what a fool I'd been for wasting so much of my money. It was at the weekend. I'd just made us both a cup of tea. She was getting used to the English-style hot tea because it was cold for her, and I suppose that was the only reason why. And I was in the kitchen making those, and I heard a knock at the door. She went to answer it, and my mate was standing there with a very guilty look on his face, and she looked quite guilty too. Before I had a chance to say, "Hi, how are you? What are you doing here?" he said he wasn't here to cause a problem, he wasn't here to fight, and he was sorry. But he also felt like he was in love with this girl, and she was in love with him, not me. He was using those words, so I quote them back. It turns out that ever since we were in the Philippines all together, he was also seeing her when I wasn't, and he was also contacting her during the same time that I was. My mate had no money to his name, so he couldn't afford to send money to her or help her with the visa process, and that made the whole thing even more strange, because why did she want him as opposed to me, who actually paid for everything? My mate was better looking than I was, but aside from that, I didn't think it was all just about looks. I wasn't about to start fighting, though. I was just standing there in complete silence trying to work out if this was actually real or not. But she went into the bedroom, started packing her things, and before I knew it, her whole bag was packed. My mate just looked at me and said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't want this to happen, but we're going to be staying together." And then, before I thought about anything, I said, "What about the visa? Surely the visa is connected to me. If I say something, you're going to have problems, aren't you? I paid for all that, and I love her." And he said, "If you don't give me any problems, I'll pay you the money back, step by step." I didn't know what that was meant to mean, but I suppose I had two choices. Apart from being absolutely destroyed and devastated and in floods of tears about what was going on in front of me, I was also thinking that if he's going to pay me back, then I might as well accept the money. He offered me 300 quid a month, not realizing that I'd spent nearly 30 grand, and he started paying me back bit by bit, but after a while he completely stopped because she got rid of him not long after. The whole situation was a mess. I quit my job and moved to another company to get away from him, and I got to the stage where I couldn't understand how I'd let this happen to me. She was quite vicious, really, I suppose, because she played me to get the money out of me to get her there. She loved my mate, apparently, but he was saying to her how eventually he would make a lot of money and things would be good, but when that never happened, she moved on. That happened a long time ago now, and since then, I've never really trusted anybody. But if I think about it, I suppose I only have myself to blame, because who would do something so stupid? I guess I would, but I wouldn't do it again.